Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another movie review. Today, we're taking a look at Transformers: Rise of the Beasts. A long, I guess, anticipated is the correct word for this for me. I've been anticipating it, and you've been very curious about this movie for a long time now because it's been 5 years since Bumblebee came out, if you can believe it. 6 years since the last night. So it's been 6 years since we last got a mainline Transformers film, since Bumblebee was technically a spin-off that got warped into a reboot. So yeah, this is our first quote unquote regular Transformers film in 6 years, and there was a lot of opinions going into this movie of all sorts of different things. Like, is it still a reboot? Like Bumblebee is kind of leading us to believe. But is it also not a reboot and still a prequel, like Bumblebee is also sort of kind of leading us to believe? And then, of course, there's the whole brouhaha with the executive producer, Lorenzo D. Bonda, whatever his name is, and him kind of going, it's a prequel. All these films are in the same universe, even though it makes absolutely no logical sense how they could be in the same universe. And then, of course, the director of this one saying that no, it's a prequel, and then no, it's a reboot, and then immediately getting interrupted on stage at the press tour by Lorenzo going, no, it's a prequel, and it's like, so there were a lot of questions going into this movie. For me, especially, a big question for me was, what was the quality of the film going to be? And I wasn't disappointed coming out of the movie. However, did I really enjoy it? Not really, because I think I had set my expectations accordingly, being a little bit skeptical. I was a little bit excited. I mean, it's like, hey, cool, Transformers movie. I like Transformers. I enjoy going to the theater to see these robots, shoot at each other, beat each other up on a big movie theater screen. So yeah. It is cool that there's going to be another one of these in theaters, and so I was looking forward to that, and a little excited to experience that again. So disappointed definitely isn't the correct word, because like I said, I kind of had my expectations set, but I didn't necessarily enjoy the movie either. And I've got several reasons, because several reasons why that is, because in a lot of ways I feel like this movie is a little bit confused at times at what it's trying to be, because the script itself, I think, is, for the most part, overall fine. It's like there's nothing revolutionary about it, but there's nothing really offensive about it either. It's not like some plot points in, say, Revenge of the Fallen or The Last Night, that are just absolutely awful, and that turns everyone off from the movie. There's nothing like horrendously bad in this movie, but I don't think it does anything like exceptionally well either. It's like the entire movie is just mid. It's very middle of the ground, your middle of the road, middle ground type movie, where it does everything just okay enough to where it's not offensive. And I think a lot of people probably were going into this movie expecting kind of another Michael Bay type Transformers movie, where there's just some, sometimes like really, really bad stuff in it that's just like, wow, this plot is bonkers stupid, and not even in a fun way like Last Night. And so the fact that this wasn't just outright terrible, which is why some people are high on it. I think other people kind of have G1 blinders on in some cases, like, ooh, Optimus Prime is a big red flat-nosed truck, and he's got the boxy shape, and he looks like he does it in G1. So, and the robots talk to one another. So, yay, this is a 10 out of 10 movie. It's like, there is one Twitter account out there. It's like, I've never actually got the name of it. It's just like, is the Rise of the Beast trailer out or something like that. And it's like daily updates. And I don't technically follow it, but I keep seeing it pop up in my feed. So I just keep getting news bites and stuff like this person, whoever they are. It's like they clearly enjoyed the movie, but it's like they got themselves so whipped up into a fervor over this movie, that it's like a life goal for them to enjoy this movie. And if they, it's like didn't enjoy it, it's like, and they enjoyed it. Good for them. I'm glad that person enjoyed the movie. Because I'm never really going to diss someone for liking a movie. It's like, because I'd be a huge hypocrite if I did that. Because of course, my favorite Transformers movie is Age of Extinction. A lot of people hate that movie. So, but I've made a whole video about a lot of the reasons why that one's my favorite, despite its major issues. And so Rise of the Beast just kind of being okay and not being offensive, but not having like not really having any highs either. I was just kind of like, okay. And I don't want to leave the theater of a Transformers movie based on prior installments just going, okay. Because each of the previous 6 movies, Bumblebee included, the 5 Bay movies and Bumblebee, they elicit some sort of reaction. Now, I never saw the first one in theaters, so but immediately after I saw that, I was like, whoa. I was in like the 3rd grade or whatever, and I was like completely blown away. And it was this, jaw-dropping, eye-opening experience. And getting older, I realized that movie has a couple issues. But overall, it's like a perfect time and place movie. It's like, we may look back at that and go, oh yeah, there's some problems, but it's like, for the time and place when that movie came out, it's like, no wonder it did so well at the box office and back in 2007. It's like, that is such a perfect movie to come out in 2007. But it doesn't feel horribly dated now. I don't think. It was just, it just hit the zeitgeist right at the right time. And then Revenge of the Fallen was, a similar thing, but to a lesser extent of it's like, man, the scale, even today, I am impressed by the scale of Revenge of the Fallen. The plot, bonkers all over the place, but I don't really fault them for that, given the circumstances around it with the writer's strike of 07 and 08 and everything. And them having to write the movie on the fly and everything. It's like, for basically starting production on the movie and having no idea what the story was going to be, and they kind of went and made it up as they went. It's not the worst movie imaginable. There's, it's like, there are issues, obviously. I've made a whole video about that too. But it's like, I still find Revenge of the Fallen very watchable, and the scale and scope of the battle sequences and the locations they go to and stuff is still very impressive. And Dark of the Moon equally so. It's like, the plot's better than 2, but there's still a couple issues. But even then, it's like, oh my gosh, the shooting on location in Chicago and Detroit and places, and it's like really just blowing that city to pieces and everything. It's some fights in DC where they are able to film and other things. It's like, again, the scope and scale impressive. And then it's you kind of see this trend, and it's like, even though there's problems with the movies, it's like there is this, you still get this feeling of, it's like, okay, yeah, it wasn't a perfect movie, but there's still stuff that kind of was impressive on like a technical level. That it's like, okay, this is still, not a perfect movie by any stretch, but it's still an achievement of some sort. Like, this is what movie theaters were made for, to experience this. It's like, I really wish that I had like a gigantic movie theater size screen at home to watch like Dark of the Moon and Age of Extinction on over and over and over again, because those movies kind of demand a screen of that size. And so it's like, so those movies are eliciting reactions, and then of course we get to the last night, and it's just, and I left, and I was like, it was good, I liked it, and then like a week later, I was like, that movie was terrible, but it's still eliciting emotions from me and getting a reaction. And then Bumblebee was like, oh, that was good. Yeah, I enjoyed that movie. That was a solid movie. And so still, getting some reactions out of it. But then Rise of the Beast, I left and I was like, okay. And to me, I feel like that's almost a bigger sin than The Last Night just being an absolute dumpster fire, horrible movie. Because at least that movie elicited a reaction from me. I did not have like, I wasn't bored watching Rise of the Beast, but I did not have like an emotion in it. I did not feel happy. I did not feel sad. I did not feel excited. I did not feel worried. There was never a moment in that movie where I had some sort of, emotional reaction to it until Bumblebee arrived at the end of the movie. And it's like, and I just totally saw it coming. It's telegraphed and everything, but still, that choice of music of "Mama Said Knock You Out," and then the ramp lowering, you see his face, and he jumps down, and the battle mask comes down, and he's kicking tailpipe and taking names and everything. It's like that was like, okay, finally the movie got cool. It finally at least got cool. Where the rest of it, I was just kind of, I wasn't bored by it either, though. It just wasn't. It's like, yeah, this is serviceable. This is fine. It's whatever. It's like I'm not bored, but I'm not happy either. It's just I am watching this movie. I am in a state of watching this movie, and then the pure nostalgia grab of playing Arrival to Earth, Optimus, and Autobots there at the last like 3 minutes of the movie. That brought a tear to my eye, but that was a pure nostalgic, neuron being activated in my brain. That was not. It's kind of like Rise of Skywalker, where the only emotional reactions I had to Rise of Skywalker was everything involving the legacy characters, like Han and Luke and Leia and Chewbacca. It's like that moment where Chewbacca sinks to his knees when he hears that Leia's died when they get back to Agent Kloss. I mean, that is heartbreaking. But it's like, anything involving like Rey and Finn, Poe, it's like, yeah, these characters are fine. I don't love them. I don't hate them. They're here. So I was kind of the same way with Rise of the Beast throughout most of it. Is I did not really get emotional reaction until the kind of obvious nostalgia things popped up, and that's, I think, a problem. Because again, the Bay film's not perfect, but at least they're eliciting reactions from people. Again, there's people that hate every single one of those 5 movies he made because they're big G1 fans or whatever. But at least it's still eliciting reactions from them. Where it's like, I feel like this movie was so bland and kind of safe and not eliciting reactions out of me and stuff, that I'm like, this kind of makes it worse than The Last Night in a lot of ways to me. It's now, as a quality film, no, it is better than The Last Night, because it's actually it's. I'm going to circle back around to this because I actually need to talk about what I find wrong with the movie, because I've just been kind of been talking about how I found it boring, and well, not even that. Again, I was not bored. It's like, I just wasn't really. I was not hooked by it, so to speak. So I think you look at the script on paper in bullet form, I don't think it's a bad story. And I don't even think it's really told that poorly. What I think is what maybe happened here, and is going to be interesting to see if it's obvious based on what we get in the bonus features. I feel like there was some studio interference here that we've kind of seen rear its ugly head in the past, where I feel like someone somewhere at the studio, I don't know who is responsible. I don't because the director this time around is, what's his name, Stephen Capel Jr. I think he's done a couple other like tentpole movies like Creed 2 and stuff, but the reviews for those movies, last I checked anyway, were generally favorable. I remember people being somewhat okay with, like, okay, this is a competent director. He knows what he's doing when he was announced. And so there was not like a massive, everyone started panicking. It's not like, we got rid of Michael Bay and then had a brief interim with Travis Knight just to get Roland Emmerich on board for Transformers. So it's like no one really panicked when this guy was announced as the director. So it seems like he makes some pretty good movies. And so for this one, it just kind of be meh. I feel like, especially, and there is still style to this movie, like, the 90s aesthetic and some of the song choices and stuff, that did not feel, to me anyway, that did not feel the studio is trying to cash in on something. That felt very much the director had a style he was going for, and this helped enforce his style and and present his style. That I really felt that, and I think a big moment of that is Bumblebee jumping out the back of Stratosphere, and because that was a really I think, well done sequence, well directed, well, it's, I mean, quote unquote well shot. I mean, the whole thing was CG. Um, but it's like that was from start to finish, that was a cool concept for a sequence, and I think it was executed well. So clearly, this guy, I feel like, does know what he's doing. And the fact that the story is really kind of meh overall, I feel like is less the fault of the director and the screenwriters and more maybe the fault of the studio, because I feel like there's several examples here that give evidence to this movie being trimmed down a lot in the edit, to where we want this film to be as short as we can get it. We don't want to overstay our welcome, which I can understand, because that's one of the big complaints about The Last Knight and Age of Extinction. More so Age of Extinction, because that's my favorite Transformers movie, and even I agree it's too long. I could easily cut 20 minutes out of that movie and make it a much better, cleaner edit, and people will probably go, oh, you know what, that's not actually as bad as I thought. They'd probably still dislike it because there's some like conceptual things in that movie that they just don't like, and it's like, okay, that's fair. You don't like, you don't agree with that direction for Transformers, but it's like they would probably go, oh, these dudes, it's like, removing a couple scenes with Shane and it would like help his character a little bit, because his character, anyway, I've talked about that before in another video. So I can understand the studio wanting to get the runtime down on this and not overstaying their welcome, especially after Bumblebee went over so well, and it was a shorter movie. It was like barely over 2 hours, if maybe it didn't even quite get over 2 hours. So I can understand them wanting that, but I think something else they have to consider is that if you're telling a well-crafted story with good writing and good characters, then the audience will stick around for as long as you ask of them. I think a good example of that is Avengers Endgame, where that movie's over 3 hours long, but you don't hear too many complaints from people about saying that movie's too long. For the most part, people go, yeah, it's long, but it was justified because of the story they were telling and the characters involved. And so, and that's the problem with Age of Extinction, is that it had a lot of superfluous stuff that wasn't needed, and that's why the movie felt so long, while also being so long, is that they should have cut some of that stuff out of there and trimmed the runtime just a little bit, and they would have had a stronger movie for it. Instead, there's some fluff in there, and it's like, now I feel like my time is being wasted. Where Rise of the Beast, I feel like, has the opposite problem, where it's not long enough. And I feel like, based on stuff we've seen of scenes being shot, because there's cell phone footage from like Peru of these things being shot, and like other actors talking about them recording dialogue and being excited, and even like reports from test screenings and stuff that seem to be accurate based on other information that's come out. I mean, you can never quite, it's like maybe they just guessed on a couple things, and like these people claiming they were in a test screening, are actually totally fibbing, but they just happened to get a couple ideas correct because of what they read the movie was going to be about online, and it just happened to line up, and rumors and stuff. But it's like there was stuff in the test screens that, if accurate, seems like it would have made for a more interesting movie than what we got. In terms of like the Autobots having a little bit more character, because a lot of people are going, oh, it's like, it's so nice that every single Autobot has some character. I'm like, do they though? I don't really know about that, because. So quick little side tangent. I don't like Wheeljack in this movie at all. I was not on board the hate train for him when they unveiled his design, and everyone's like, "Oh, he looks nothing like Wheeljack." Blah blah blah. I'm like, because I'm a fan of the Bayverse, the first 4 movies anyway, so I know all about, and Transformers changes up the designs of their characters all the time. So it's like, okay. It's like that. He doesn't really look like Wheeljack, and yeah, it's a little bit annoying that he looked like Wheeljack and Bumblebee, and he looks nothing like a traditional Wheeljack here. But you know what? It's fine, as long as they nail the character. But the problem is with Wheeljack and Rise of the Beast is that they don't nail the character like at all. Where it's like there's not, as far as I'm aware, unless I'm mistaken, there's not one mention of him knowing how to invent things, the fact that he is an inventor or a kooky scientist or anything. So they're actually kind of 0 for 2 in like nailing what Wheeljack's typical character is, where it's like they A, don't have the design, and B, they don't have the character archetype down. of what Wheeljack is supposed to be. So in a weird way, it's like Dark of the Moon, a Michael Bay Transformers movie, is actually ahead of Rise of the Beasts on this one. Where it's like we have Q, who is just a renamed Wheeljack. The toy was named Wheeljack. He was Wheeljack in the video game and the comic and everything. So I mean, he is Wheeljack just with a different name. They at least had the thing down that he was an inventor. They had that part down. So, yeah, he looked nothing like a traditional G1 Wheeljack, but they at least had the character trait down. And I feel like the Bayverse was a little bit better at that than people like to give it credit for in some cases. Not all cases, but in some cases. They at least understood their characters the original characters to a point. And it's like they were sometimes wildly different interpretations, but they at least got some things down. I think Lockdown is a perfect adaptation. Optimus Prime is certainly an interesting adaptation that a lot of people don't agree with, but I feel like that, at least at the start of the series, movie 1, TF07, Optimus Prime, that's a pretty good adaptation of Optimus Prime, even if the design's a little different. Ratchet, he's a doctor. Ironhide, he's kind of the big, the big grunt that loves to shoot stuff. He's the tough guy. Jazz, he's the cool second in command, and Jetfire, he's a guy that turns into a plane. That's really all you need for Jetfire. So, on and on. So the fact that they got Wheeljack so wrong in this movie, where it's like not only does the design look bad, because I wasn't huge, because it's I think the body's fine. It's really the face that I find disturbing. I could care less about the glasses. I don't really care that it's like, okay, he's got glasses, whatever. I don't really care about that. It's more the big lips. I don't like the big lips. There's something about like the way his face looks that I have a problem with. It's and then the fact that he doesn't invent things and he has like 3 lines in the movie. It's like, okay, that was kind of a waste of a Wheeljack, but whatever. And then that's one of those things where it's like in these test screenings, it seems like that Wheeljack had more to do. I mean, there's set photos of him with a vehicle mode that has English lettering on it because he was supposed to be in some of the New York scenes. But then they removed some of that. And then because I guess he was supposed to be with them in New York, but maybe he's not really much of a warrior because he's the inventor, so maybe he stayed back at the warehouse or whatever during the Staten Island battle originally, and through some of this maybe they decided that they would just remove him from the first half of the movie because of that, but then he doesn't really do much in Peru either, so it's very strange. It's very weird, and I don't know. And maybe they were actually filming some of those scenes to take place in Peru, and then they kind of thought to themselves, wait, shouldn't he maybe have Spanish lettering on the side of the van? It's like, okay, let's change it. And so they changed it. Maybe that's where that comes from. I don't know. But it seems like, based on some of these test screening reports, that like maybe he and RC had some sort of weird, like romantic relationship or something. It's like, that would be something. That'd be something. So it's like, I agree. Maybe an odd choice, but depending on how it was presented, it's like, oh, you know what? That was actually really cute. And I liked that. It gave them some much needed character, because I don't think RC does. It's like, I don't think RC, she gets more screen time, but I don't think RC gets any better characterization here than she did in the Bay movies in Revenge of the Fallen for all 3 seconds she was in it. It's kind of sad. It's like, she hasn't really, she hops around, she shoots at things. She kind of, like screams a couple times, and it seems like she's competent at combat, I guess. But I feel like they were maybe trying to go for a Transformers Prime RC portrayal here, but there's just so little of her that it's like, okay, whatever. Bumblebee's dead for most of it, so it's like, and that's something I'll get to here in a minute. Rolling my eyes as I say that. And so it's like you're really just kind of left with Mirage and Optimus Prime. Mirage, I didn't hate. I'm kind of surprised by that. It's like, okay, you know what? Mirage is fine. As more trailers and stuff started to come out, more TV spots, I slowly kind of started to realize, okay, the out of context stuff we've gotten in some of these earlier trailers and stuff just painted a bad picture of him. He's not going to be as bad as I thought. And I thought Mirage was fine. I didn't love him. I didn't hate him. He was totally fine. And I think Pete Davidson actually did a pretty good job with him. I would, they're going to make a sequel to this. I'm sure he's going to be back in the sequel. I will not be upset to see him back. And, the fact that he survived, his injuries or whatever. That's fine. I'm not a fan of his design, I will say, because there's so little actual car kibble on him, which of course was an issue that the later Bay films ran into and stuff. So I think the trend continues here of Mirage. But I guess it makes sense that they didn't put much car kibble on it because he has like 5 different alt modes, which makes no sense. But it's like whenever it comes to mass shifting, I just kind of go, okay, I don't like it. It's annoying, but I just kind of hand wave it and go whatever. It doesn't completely break things for me. And then finally we have Optimus, who's really just kind of a watered down version of Age of Extinction Optimus. But we don't even have we don't even really have the full context on why he is in this movie. We just have a couple other people telling us that, and I didn't really buy it that well. So I'm going to be very interested to see how much of this is on the Blu-ray and the bonus features. But most of you out there are probably maybe aware there was supposed to be this scene involving a Decepticon that turned into a bus named Transit. I'm pretty sure he was supposed to be voiced by John DiMaggio. And it would have been, this Decepticon assassin that was here to take out the Autobots and Optimus would have had to kill him to keep their location secret. Because obviously the Decepticons know that the Autobots are hiding somewhere on Earth, but they just don't know where. And I guess they just don't want to send them. And okay, maybe it's like, why don't you just send an invasion force already? But whatever. They could have. There's probably a way they could have explained it. To where it made sense. Like maybe it's just a Decepticon straggler that happens to stumble on the Autobots. He's not really there for them. But anyway, Optimus has to kill Transit to keep the Autobots hidden and stuff. And based on what the director has said is that this would have been like our introduction to Optimus in the film, and it would have helped us understand where he is emotionally in the movie. But they removed the scene because it was too dark thematically. And I'm like, wait, so you had an entire scene that whose sole focus, the scene's whole sole focus, was to allow the audience to understand where Optimus Prime is emotionally in the movie in a show don't tell type way. And so you instead remove that and instead just sprinkle that along in dialogue, because it takes us forever to I mean, I kind of figured it out because I know Transformers, and it's like, okay, he's upset that they can't go back to Cybertron, but it took them a while, like halfway through the movie, for anyone to say anything to Noah or whoever. It's like, oh yeah, no, he's just kind of upset that we can't go back to Cybertron, and he's too busy focusing on our survival to really understand humans, and it's like, we're halfway through the movie. You don't cut that scene because it's too dark thematically. You keep that because while dark, it serves a purpose in the storytelling. And so I'm kind of baffled by that decision. It's like, so they're saying that, but I feel like that's an excuse, and the studio wanted it gone because it took too long. It's like, oh, this is a 5-minute scene. If we cut this, we can shave 5 minutes off the movie, and we get to the end quicker. And it's like, and another more evidence I have to this idea that the studio really wanted to trim it down is that I feel like there was some weird ADR moments in it, particularly mostly with the robots, because it's like, well, they're animated, so you can kind of make them say whatever, and change it pretty easily. And they cut around it pretty well for the most part, but every now and then there's a moment that I feel like kind of rears its ugly head, where at least from what I could tell, the lip sync did not match the dialogue the characters were saying. For instance, in Peru, when they're the mountain hill chase, down the mountain road, and Optimus transforms, and he's saying that, he's going to take the key from Scourge and then rip off his head. The wide shot, I think, is fine of him arming his cannon and saying, I'm going to take that key. But then when it cuts to the close-up of him activating his battle mask and Optimus says, and then I'm going to rip off his head, his lips become obscured pretty quickly because of the mask going up. But those first couple words out of his mouth, I didn't think matched up with what he was saying. I watched that in the movie and I was like, wait, what? what he didn't say that. And I didn't even really completely comprehend that's what was going on at the time until later on in the movie, like 10 minutes later, when they're in the jungle and Primal says something, and I can't remember which one it was. It was either he stopped speaking but his lips kept going, or his lips stopped but yet he continued to speak. It was something along the lines of that. And I just it's one of those things. I feel like 99% of the people out there aren't even going to notice, but I noticed it and I'm like, wait, what? And so that was kind of when the light bulb went when I'm like, oh no, they edited this movie they really hacked and slashed this movie to death if they were changing line reads for certain robots at the last second. And then I started to think about other scenes where I was like, oh, that kind of came out of nowhere. It's like, oh, that was weird. Ooh, that seemed like a bit of a shoddy edit. I'm like, oh, they totally hacked this apart in editing, didn't they? I mean, it still tells the story is not difficult to follow. It's very simple, but I think it's too simple. Where it's like I needed more of it. It's not that it doesn't make sense. I just wanted more of it to feel like a complete story, and not just like we're speeding through this to get to the end as quickly as possible. For instance, I think one big casualty of this is Elena, who I think is just like a completely useless character in the movie. Because it's like yeah, at the end of the movie, it's the big climax. You're giving your two humans something to do, which is good. It's better than them just running away and screaming the entire time. Noah's in the Mirage exosuit. Meanwhile, Elena has to use the knowledge she's gathered throughout the movie to decipher the to decipher the hidden, the message that's on to put in the shutdown code for the space bridge. And she's like 99% of the way there, and then Scourge destroys the thing, and then at the last second they have to change plans and they have to destroy it instead of instead of shutting it down. So they have to cause a big explosion instead. And because she doesn't get to accomplish her task, she herself does nothing in the movie after like the first act where she accidentally she accidentally destroys the bird statue, and that unveils the transwarp key inside. After that, she's a useless character, and you could have left her back in New York. Even like we need to figure out where the next clue is and stuff, and it's like I mean it's like, oh well, she had that information. It's like, well, yeah, but she got that information because she went on 1995 Google. At least I'm pretty sure. So it's like it didn't take her very long, and it was not very difficult to find the information she needed on where the next piece might be. I mean, for Pete's sake, they even say in the same scene, she's like, oh, I've got this information. And it's like, okay, well, then why do we even need this? Why do we even need to go find the second piece? It's like, well, because I found the information pretty easily, so that means Scourge is probably going to be able to find it easily too. So we need to go get it before he can. So they kind of wrote themselves into a corner with that, to where it's like, okay, so literally everything you bring to the table as a character in terms of your relevance to a plot, other characters can do and better, kind of, or not, maybe not better, but in just in different ways. And like your big contribution at the end ends up becoming null and void because you don't get to finish your task because the thing gets blown up. And then I kind of laughed and I under my breath in the theater. It's like, oh yay, I get the recognition for discovering this thing under the Mayan ruins in Peru or whatever. And I'm like, so she gets rewarded for doing nothing. You know what? Good for her. That is the American way. But it's like, but the saving grace of her is that I think she's acted well and she's not annoying. Because if she had been annoying, if she'd been like screaming the whole time, then it would have been kind of annoying. But it's like, so I'm curious now. It's like, so what else did she maybe do in the movie? And what else did she maybe bring to the table? Or it's like, what other character moments did she have that were maybe cut for time? Like, I feel like they were trying to set up a connection between her and AirRaiser. Like she would kind of have AirRaiser as a friend slash mentor robot, while Noah obviously had Mirage as, the buddy Autobot, and then there was a more parallel character growth between him and Optimus. Um, because because in the scene where AirRaiser's corrupted by the Dark Energon or whatever, and she and Primal are fighting, um, Elena's running around going, Air Razor, no! And, she's acting like she really cares. It's like, you've known this giant robo bird for like 2 days. Why do you care that much? And it's like, you haven't really gone through that much together, because it's like, first of all, she swooped in and helped save you at the very end of the Ellis Island fight. So it's not like you were even in the middle of combat together to be bonded there, because she just came in and saved you. It's like, okay, you're grateful she saved you or whatever. But then, she's like, she completely disappears during most of they're in the, I forget what the capital of Peru is called. The city, and so she just kind of disappears until the road chase, and then she swoops in and does some fire breath stuff. But during that part of the movie, Elena and Noah are underground, so these characters don't speak again for like a long stretch of movie, like 30 minutes of movie. They don't say a word to each other until they get to like the camp with the Maximals and everything. So and so then she's like all upset that AirRaiser died. And it's like, you didn't know this character, really? You knew her for like 2 days, and it's like, so I'm like, was there other scenes you cut between you cut out of the movie between these two to give them more of a connection? I would have liked to see that. Again, audiences will stick around for longer if you are telling a compelling story with good, compelling characters. And by trying to trim this down to as short a movie as possible to not overstate your welcome, you kind of accidentally ruined a character in the edit. So I kind of feel bad for the actress. What's her name? Dominique Fishback, I think. Something's like that is probably totally wrong. It's like, because I said that out loud. I'm like, wait, Fishback. That doesn't sound right. Hold on. I'm actually gonna look it up right now, because I don't want to accidentally insult this woman. Let's see here. Google Transformers: Rise of the Beasts. She's not showing up on the main cast list on the main page. I have to go to the Wikipedia page or IMDb, which is going to be the first one to show up. Oh, no, I did get that right. Her name actually is Dominique Fishback. Huh. How about that? All right. Well, I apologize then for thinking I got that wrong. But yeah. So it's like, I mean, she really had absolutely nothing to do in this movie except just kind of follow everyone along. And that's, I don't know, that's unfortunate. Because I wonder what else she could have, because thinking about it, it's like, because if that was always her purpose in the script, and it's because let's say just for argument's sake that they didn't cut anything from this movie and everything they shot was in the movie, which we know isn't true, but again, for argument's sake, let's say that everything they wanted to be in this movie was what's in this movie from the get-go, and they don't have any scenes on the cutting room floor. Then she's a useless character, and what you should have done in a rewrite is you should have removed her and given her stuff about art history and knowing some of like like being able to figure out the stuff about Peru. You should have given that to Noah. It's like Noah's working as a janitor at the museum, but he's got an art history degree, but he didn't go to college, or he doesn't he doesn't have an art history degree, but he knows a lot about it just because he's curious. But he can't be hired in that position because he doesn't have a degree, so he's just got this janitor job or security job or whatever. But he needs the money, and then maybe he loses the job because he accidentally knocks over the statue, and no one really notices it. But it uncovers the key, and then in desperation he goes out with his friend to steal the car because he needs the money to help his brother. And then the chase ensues, and then it's like, oh, when you knock this over, you accidentally activated this, and he's like, I know that statue, I can go in and get it for you because I'm the janitor or whatever, I've got the keys. and then he walks in to get it after hours, and then the Terracons show up, and then the whole rest of the movie goes, and it's like you kind of you have a more economical use of your space, and it's like you don't have this one character that ends up being useless, and you have just one more well-rounded character. Because I thought Noah was fine. I didn't, kind of like Mirage. I didn't hate him, but I didn't love him. I don't think he had some of the early charm that Shia LaBeouf had in, say, the first Transformers before he went a little crazy in 2 and 3, and then I didn't, I find Cade Yeager to be fine in Age of Extinction, and there was some kind of goofball, not necessarily goofball charm, but there was some charm to him in Age of Extinction. It's like it's like maybe him being from the South slash the character, obviously not the actor, but it's like being from the South and Texas and everything, that being similar to the Midwest in terms of ideals and everything. Want to protect, really want to take care of your family and your property, and apple pie in the American way, and blah blah blah. It's like, yeah, I got it, I understood it. It was fine, it worked until he got really mean in the last night. So Noah was fine, but it's like, if you should have probably just given all those things to him and just written Elena out of the script. So I wonder if they I wonder what else she probably did in, like, a different cut of the movie. So I'm very curious about that. And so yeah, it's like, so basically my big complaint about this, why I think it's mid, is that it's like, well, you cut so much stuff out of the movie, it just really feels meh. And it's like, and you didn't let things breathe. You didn't really take time. It's like the movie never really stops to take a breath. Really, it's like there's always, it's like the only time I really feels like it really ever builds up the characters any, and lets the characters kind of just interact and grow with one another without like setting up something, I really feel, is when Mirage and Noah meet for the first time. It's like, oh, I gotta get the blood, gotta get the energon pumping and stuff. And it's like, ooh, yeah, that's right, I'm a giant robot, this is probably a lot for you, huh? And it's, and then the bonding moment between him and the younger brother. I can't remember the younger brother's name, but it's like, and I thought that was cute that they used Sonic and Tails and Knuckles as the code names over the walkie. That was cute. I also do find it funny that that was included in this movie the exact same week that the creator of Sonic the Hedgehog is going to prison in Japan for insider trading. I think that's kind of funny. Just a bad coincidence there, but yeah, it's like, you just cut so much out of this movie, clearly, to me anyway, that it's like you kind of removed whatever a lot of the personality that you were trying to get through. Because that was something I liked about Bumblebee a lot, is that it clearly wasn't Michael Bay's Transformers. And I like Michael Bay's Transformers 4 out of the 5 times. But it was a new director, and he put his own stamp on it, but it still felt very, Transformers, and it still kind of, even though it's clearly a different continuity, it still felt like it lived up to the other movies in terms of cinematography and the visual effects and all that. Meanwhile, this movie just kind of feels cheap. It feels like a cheap knockoff. It's like Diet Michael Bay. Because even like the locations that they're going to, it's like, I think the idea of using, it's like, okay, well, first of all, let me say that when everyone kind of slowly figured out that this was going to be another MacGuffin hunt, where it's like, we got to find this object in a different country to save the world that's tied to the history of humanity. I and a lot of other people rolled my eyes, because we've seen that plot thread so many times in these movies. But I was willing to give it the benefit of the doubt, because, like, well, you know what? Bumblebee wasn't wholly original either. It was kind of combining E.T. and the Iron Giant with some plot threads from the first movie. So, you know what? I'm willing to give Rise of the Beast the benefit of the doubt, because Bumblebee took all those concepts, even though they weren't original, and did them really, really well. So maybe, and it had its own personality and flair to it. So maybe what this movie is going to do is that it's going to do that, we're off on the MacGuffin search again in a different country, but it's going to be the best one to do this. And I don't think it is. I think that in a lot of ways, like I was saying earlier about the locations I use, I think Revenge of the Fallen's better in terms of doing that. I think Dark of the Moon is better in terms of doing that. I think Age of Extinction is better in terms of doing that. Because I feel like those movies really, really, really utilized their locations well. It gave us some stunning imagery. It let us really feel, it really give us a sense of scale with the locations we were in. um it really showed off the locations well, because I mean the pyramids are huge, and it's like, and there were shots where it's like, hey, here's Simmons climbing up the pyramid as Devastator's tearing it apart. Yes, you have the I'm directly below the enemy scrotum scene. Ignoring that, again, Revenge of the Fallen still has lots of problems, but it's like it still utilized that stuff well in terms of the locations. It's like, oh, this giant battle in Egypt. It was filmed on not on loc. I don't think they actually filmed it in Egypt, but they went out to a desert and built a big set and blew a bunch of stuff up. Where meanwhile, in Rise of the Beasts, like, yeah, they quote unquote went to Machu Picchu. Yeah, they were quote unquote the first film crew to ever film in Machu Picchu. But the stuff they were allowed to do in Machu Picchu was nothing extensive. It's like you have them walking around it a little bit, and then you have like a couple quick crane shots over it, and that's really it. There's no big fight there. The Machu Picchu doesn't really have anything to do with the plot. It's just kind of there, close to the location. So it feels more like you're ticking a box rather than you're actually, showing off this location. And I think same for the city they were in a lot, because like they're in and out very quickly. It's like they get in, they show off the parade a little bit, and then they bounce very quickly. They go down into the catacombs. They're back out into the jungle. There's a very, very brief chase. It's not even a chase. It's really more, both teams are just exiting the city, and then you really get into the chase when we get into the mountains. And it just feels like they didn't utilize the location as well as Michael Bay would have. Where it's like, if this were a Bay production, it's like, you would have been in this city for a little longer. It would have taken probably longer to find the. I mean, and that's another thing, is that feeling kind of like a check mark. We're just ticking a box and getting this out of the way. Is that it's like it wasn't even difficult to find the thing they were looking for. Because it's like, there's this thing in the middle of the church courtyard, and there's all these maximal symbols. And it's like, and I've seen a couple other people point this out online, but it's like, okay, so in 400 years or however long it's been since this church has been here, since the Spanish built this church here, no one ever looked at the symbols on the ground, or even just accidentally moved their foot and accidentally, lined up the maximal symbols. And because it's like, because I mean, the pointed ears and everything are clearly, it's like, oh, if we move it, it kind of moves a little bit. And it's not like it, and this is one of the things where it's like, okay, there was a missed opportunity here, where what they should have done is because she's small, they should have taken RC with them down into the catacombs, and as protection against. It's like, I thought the glove thing that Noah had was fine, because it's like, okay, yeah, it's kind of the evolution of the boomsticks and the grapple gloves from Dark of the Moon, and Cade's, night gun and everything. To give the humans a little bit of self-defense. I like that. That's fine. But since RC's smaller, she could have very easily probably snuck in with them, and so I think it would have been a better. It's like, helping explain. Just give a couple extra little details here to enrich the plot of only a Cybertronian, or a robot in disguise or whatever. Since I'm pretty sure the Maximals are not Cybertronian, which is whatever. It's like, okay, they changed the story. It's not a big deal. It's like, have RC go with, and like someone that's it's like a human would not be strong enough to move these things, which is why this entryway was not discovered in 400 years or whatever. It's like, have RC. It's like, it gives her something a little bit to do. She follows them down there. She's fighting the Terracon drones, the freezers or whatever they're called. And then and she helps them. It's like maybe she stays behind to fight off a horde of them or something, and then that allows Elena and Noah to get out into the jungle. And I did kind of like the twist that it wasn't there. It's like, okay, that's a decent. And then so then my thought was like, the Maximals will have hidden it in Machu Picchu. No, they just had it in this random village underneath a cloth the entire time. It's like, what? That wasn't hidden. I know this is a remote village, but surely people come across this every now and then. So it's like, so you're what? You're just gonna throw it in? It's like, how long has it been there? The Maximal said that, yeah, we were. Primal said, yeah, no, we hit it there at first, then we decided to move it when the city was getting too large. It's like, okay, so you just threw it in a sock drawer for a couple hundred years? What? It's like, hide it somewhere else. Put it in Machu Picchu. Give the location that you're showing off in your marketing and stuff some actual story relevance instead of it just kind of being there in the background and never calling it out. It felt a little, dare I say, lazy, and I don't know if that was the original intent or if that's something that was trimmed down in the edit. I feel like they even censored the movie in a couple of places. Speaking of Machu Picchu and not really having a fight scene there is one very brief small skirmish there, and it is between the corrupted Air Razor and Optimus Primal. And I don't know if I blinked and I missed it, or if anyone else was confused by this, but the way Primal, had to kind of mercy kill Air Razor, I was confused by the way it was shot at, and I'm like, they totally removed a shot here. They totally removed a shot here, because I don't know who in their right mind would have signed off on this because of how confusing it is. I feel like it's like an elf whenever they're at the book publishers, and it's like the printer left off the last page because you cut corners and it was cheaper, so now people are confused about how the book ends because you literally removed the ending. I feel it's like, well, people are confused about how Air Razor actually died because you removed a shot. It's like, and they kind of alluded to it, I guess, but it's like, because at first I thought Primal like snapped her neck or something, but then I'm like, well, no, because he had her in that vice grip, and it kind of showed, like the red glow in her chest. So it's like, so did he crush her spark? Is that what happened? Did he like squeeze her and crush her spark, and that's how she died? Because the movie does not make it clear. And I didn't need a gratuitous, give me your face moment like Optimus in Revenge of the Fallen of Primal reaching through her chest and crushing her spark or anything. But it cuts it, and there's, and like I said, because originally I thought at first he would have snapped her neck, but that's not what happened. And then I was left confused as to what happened. I'm like, oh wait, was he supposed to? Is that what they were trying to get across? Is that he crushed her chest? It's like, if they wanted to remove that because the studio executives thought it was too gruesome, even though it's a bunch of giant robots, then they should have cut to Elena and put in a robotic sounding snap effect, and then cut to and then cutting to Primal laying carefully laying down Air Razor's body, and then you have understood, oh, he snapped her robo neck. Got it. I understand now. So it's just one of those things. It's like they were trimming stuff up until the very end here, because I even think there's shots that are longer in the trailers, because like that shot of Prime kneeling down to inspect Noah's like, you brought a human here. It's like that because that's in that second trailer. I feel like it's a half second longer in the trailer than it is in the movie. It's very, very quick in the movie. I'm like, that's a weird shot to be really quick in the movie. So that feels like that got trimmed in the edit. And half the time I feel like when Prime's mask was up, it was so they could have him say whatever the heck they wanted him to say and ADR it in later so they could build a scene, so they could build a recut scene around it instead of what he was originally supposed to say in a longer version of the scene. And there's several moments where I'm like, okay, did you originally write this way and it was just supposed to be this kind of little thing for fans to kind of snap and point and go, I know what that means? Or was there more here? Because one thing I had an issue with is the fight on Staten Island. And this leads, because it's obviously a tee up, and then it leads into later in the movie with I actually have a lot of problems with the fight on Staten Island, come to think about it. Is that Optimus is and the Autobots are fighting the Terracons, and Optimus is facing Scourge, and Scourge just grabs his arm and stops the axe mid swing or whatever, and Optimus is like bewildered. He's like, "No, impossible!" And it's like, I do so enjoy the look of a lower life form when he recognizes a higher being, and then it cuts. That's it. And then a minute or so later, then Optimus is incapacitated and stuck underneath that statue or whatever. It's like, first of all, would he really have been stuck underneath that? And then second of all, I think it's Battletrap that then says, and you call yourself a Prime, followed up by Scourge saying Primus would be ashamed. First of all, when did Optimus identify himself during that fight? Or when did the Terracons realize who he is? Because Scourge has Autobot symbols all over him, and Decepticon symbols, and Wrecker symbols, and Maximal symbols, and like one Predacon symbol. Because he's a trophy hunter or whatever. So they have some idea, some concept of the Autobot Decepticon Civil War on Cybertron. So, like, did they just automatically know who Optimus was? Or are they just kind of, out of the loop? Do they kind of have some idea what it is? I mean, on the box art for Battletrap's toy, he has a Decepticon symbol on his forehead. So which, would visually would maybe lead you to think that he was a Decepticon that then fell into the thrall of Unicron, which, that tracks, that makes sense. It's like, he's like, oh, forget these Decepticons. I found the real higher power I need to be serving to be on the winning team here. Because it's like, this guy eats planets. Megatron's got nothing on this guy. So it's like, so does Scourge know about Optimus Prime through Battletrap? I mean, it's like, does Battletrap know who Optimus is? Because I would assume that every Decepticon would know what Optimus Prime looks like, and he's a Prime for Pete's sake. So even then, it's like, did he even need Battletrap to tell him that? Because he's a servant of Unicron. So I would feel like that he would then maybe be able to recognize the power of the Matrix of Leadership residing within Optimus, because people have done like frame by frames of the trailers and stuff, and you can see kind of the edges. If that's not supposed to be the edges of the Matrix of Leadership in there, then they were being very coy about the kind of the insides of what Optimus's chest looks like behind his windows on his chest. It's like, that kind of looks like the handles for the Matrix of Leadership. If that's not what that's supposed to be, then you kind of knew what you were doing to make people think that. Because that looks like the handles to the Matrix of Leadership. So would Scourge like recognize that? Because I feel like an extended version of that scene would be, like, Optimus is shocked, he's surprised, he's like, no, impossible. How are you beating me? Basically, and this is another reason why I think they should have kept the transit scene, because if we see Optimus, like, easily dispatching this big lumbering Decepticon that, is easily, is like, should easily, should be more than a match for Optimus, but he's Optimus Prime, so he easily takes care of this Decepticon, and then he dumps him in the river with all these other Decepticons he's killed. That gives us, it's like, that gives us a working knowledge of where Optimus is at emotionally, and also for new and returning viewers that have, and especially for new viewers that have never seen a Transformers movie before, they understand what power level Optimus is working on here. So it's like, okay, so he's a very skilled warrior. He knows what he's doing. So then he comes up against the Terracons, and Scourge just starts kicking his tailpipe. It kind of gives you a better idea of, it's like, oh, these guys are definitely formidable opponents. And we sort of kind of got that already. That was the intention of the opening scene, obviously, with Ape Link and Scourge. But that fight was so woefully short, I felt. It's like, it lasted all of 3 seconds. It's like, I understand making that fight short to demonstrate that Scourge is a worthy opponent and more powerful than most of the foes he comes up against, also evident by all the trophies he has on his armor. But it's like that fight was too short. It's like Ape Link is supposed to be the cut before Optimus Prime. He's supposed to be the Optimus Prime equivalent for the Maximals. Maybe he doesn't have a Matrix, but he was like, he's still supposed to be pretty powerful. So it's like, he should have lasted a little bit longer than 3 whole seconds. So yeah, back to Ellis Island. I feel like a longer version of that scene would be, like Prime is getting his tailpipe kicked. Scourge is like, oh, I love it when, a lower life form recognizes, a higher being. And then I feel like, he kicks Optimus away, then Optimus like readies himself again. It's like, I'm not a lower life form. I am Optimus Prime. And then like Scourge just maybe laughs and says, or says something about, it's like, oh, finally I get to fight. It's like, it's been a long time since my master has had the pleasure of like dealing with the Prime or something like that. And it's like, Optimus having some sort of remark about, you tell Megatron, because I would assume that Optimus would assume that they're Decepticons. And it's like, you tell Megatron that, this world is, that, the Autobots will never surrender. And then Scourge is like, oh, well, we do not serve Megatron in his childish ambitions. And then it's like, and then they continue to fight. Bumblebee jumps in. So then Optimus is kind of already starting to think. And then when Airazor shows up, that's why he kind of answers for her when she starts to allude to the legend. A hungry god that roams the universe. And that's when it clicks for Optimus. He's like, Unicron. They're servants of Unicron. That's who they are. And he realizes that there is a, greater power, good versus evil fight going on here, because, as the bearer of the Matrix, he has the remaining life force of Primus residing within him. So it's a disciple of Primus versus, the followers of Unicron going head to head, which, it's really something that, if we're going by the aligned continuity standards, is probably something that has not happened in a long, long time. So this is kind of a big historic thing, and I feel like they should make more of a big deal about that. But if you're trying to get the movie along, moving it along, and you don't have to do a great big, Transformers Prime style exposition speech about Primus and Unicron. For the people that know, they know, but it still informs the character of Optimus Prime that he would be able to figure it out based on that. And just kind of imply some of that stuff, and then that's something you can do a bigger exposition dump on in a later movie. It's just small little character interactions like that I think would have improved the movie so much for me, and is kind of honestly something that I was almost expecting them to do, because Bumblebee did so well with their acknowledging that it was a limited cast, and it was just Bumblebee as the main Autobot. I mean, Optimus was there at the beginning, and then he shows up at the end in a flashback scene, and then the other Autobots get their little cameos. But Bumblebee is the star of that movie, and then you just have 2 villains in Dropkick and Shatter, and then you've got these other humans running around. But it did pretty well with, letting these characters. And it's like, Bumblebee feels like a complete movie that when you finish it, it feels like, okay, that was a complete story that took its time and told the story it wanted to tell. And they got through everything they wanted to get through, even though there was like, a couple obvious holdovers from when it was originally a prequel to the first movie. It didn't really feel that awkward. It's just, the things that could have been awkward, like Sector 7 being there and Bumblebee turning into a Camaro at the end. It's like that stuff that just felt more like homages to the original movie in this new continuity, rather than it being awkward. The characters felt, natural and everything, where Rise of the Beast feels so rushed that when the movie ended, I didn't really feel like much was accomplished. And it's just like, this was just diet Michael Bay. And then let's bring up the Bumblebee in the room. The fact that they quote unquote killed him off. This was another thing that I was like, okay, you need 2 more lines of dialogue to explain this further, and I will have no issues with this part of the story. But because you either didn't think about including it or cut it from the movie, I now have a problem with this part of the story. His quote unquote death, which is his second or third quote unquote death, depending on how you're counting, in 2 movies, in this one brand new continuity now, because he shuts down at the beginning of Bumblebee, and Charlie fixes him. But that's probably not really a death. That was just like an emergency stasis or whatever. So okay, fine, not a death. We won't count that one. But then Dropkick, quote unquote, kills him at the end of Bumblebee, or close to the end of it. And then Charlie uses the stun gun or whatever to, jumpstart his spark or his engine or whatever, and it brings him back to life. Hence the Haley Steinfeld song "Back to Life." And so it's like, okay, and that kind of helps, completely reboot him, and he gets all of his memories back, and he's no longer an amnesiac, and that really brings him completely back and everything. So it's like, and that's another thing. It's like, okay, so was he just in stasis? Was he really dead? That's one of those things that remains kind of ambiguous about that. And then they basically do the same thing here too. It feels so repetitive. It's like, okay, well, Bumblebee, and it's like, I'm fine with Bumblebee sacrificing himself, but I would have preferred it to be, and they're not clear on the weapon that Scourge uses. Thinking about it, and it's the same thing that we see in the first trailer. That was obviously an unfinished version of the scene before they finished it up. It seems like to me what he did is he just drained Bumblebee's energon, because there's no actual physical damage to Bumblebee other than the sword strike. But the sword strike obviously did not impact Bumblebee's spark, because as we've seen multiple times now, is whenever a Transformer's spark gets destroyed in this new continuity, they just straight up explode. It's like we saw it with Dropkick, we saw it with Shatter, we saw it with Nightbird in Rise of the Beast. It's like they just straight up explode now. So Bumblebee's spark obviously was not damaged. He's got a stab mark, but Optimus is stabbed a couple times during this fight, and he ends up, healing on his own. I guess his auto repair systems fixed him or whatever. It's like, that's something I can hand wave, and I don't really have an issue with. Although it would have given Wheeljack something to do. It was like, ooh, you guys are in a bad way. Here, let me help. But again, it's something I can hand wave. I don't really care. That's not a big deal to me. So clearly Bumblebee is not really that physically badly hurt, but then he goes into shutdown anyway. So I'm left to assume that he wasn't really dead and he was just drained of energon. And then that's why, later on in the movie, and they never say he's dead. I mean, Airazor kind of alludes to it because she says, "I'm sorry for your loss," but I kind of find it weird how they're just carting his body around with them. It's like, did they not want to leave him behind in New York in case like a cop wandered in and saw this giant robot lying dead there on the concrete or something? It's like, I mean, did they feel like burying him in a junkyard would have been disrespectful? So it's like they're carting his body around with them. So I feel like there must have been a line somewhere, or it was supposed to be more greatly implied some other way that he was just in a coma basically. And because it's like, I think it's RC who asks on the plane, it's like, do you think an energon infusion would work? And so that's why I'm like, okay, so he's just drained of energon, because if his spark was extinguished, then it would either not work, or B, you can just revive a Transformer in this continuity by giving them an energon transfusion, and death now has no meaning in this continuity. And I don't want to consider that option, because that's going to remove like dramatic tension the however many more movies they make in this new continuity, and hopefully don't tie it into the Bayverse outside of multiverse theory. So then the Maximals enter the picture, and they put Bumblebee on an energon couch. Okay, and Primal says like, your friend will rest comfortably here, and I it's like, we as humans, when someone passes away, we say they're gonna rest in peace, they have earned their rest or whatever. But the way they just kind of laid Bumblebee out on that couch and just kind of left him there, it really did kind of feel like that they were not treating him as if he was actually dead. It really felt more like now I feel like the movie is treating him as if he's dead. But I feel like the characters are not treating him that way, because there was supposed to be another line or two that ended up being cut about his energon just being drained. And And like maybe that's something Scourge does to some of his opponents, where it's like because obviously Scourge is all messed up, and so maybe he has to like drain some energon from his opponents to keep himself going like a vampire or something like that. I don't know. So and so they mentioned that, oh, the energon, these energon cubes are inert. It's like they would need a great power to reactivate them. And in the theater, I was kind of like Matrix of Leadership, but no, it's like, okay, well, you know what, that's fine. That'd probably be OP anyway. So then the rest of it I'm fine with. Okay, space bridge opens, the shockwave goes through and it reactivates all the energon, and it refills Bumblebee of energon. And he wakes back up from his coma. I'm fine with that. But it's the earlier stuff of them really treating him like he's dead that I just have an issue with, because it's like you've already played this card. It's like I'm fine because him being in a coma versus him being dead are like two different things. I'd say ultimately they kind of serve the same purpose, I guess, but it's still on a base level two different things, because if he's dead, then I feel like there should be no way to bring him back. But then if he's just in a coma, then it's like, okay, then yeah, you can bring him back, because if he was dead in Bumblebee, then I feel like that's his one time to be dead, and you can't go back down that road. You can't kill him off again later. And if you do kill him off again later, you certainly can't bring him back a third time. And that was kind of that they were kind of on shaky ground there with Megatron and the Bayverse, where it's like he died at the end of the first movie, then Prime rips his head off at the end of Dark of the Moon, and then he comes back as Galvatron in Age of Extinction. But I feel like they explained that away well enough to where his head was hooked up to computers, and it's like it's Transformers animated, where it's like he's got a battery source, so it's like his mind is still working, so he's able to hack into KSI systems to build his new body. That I bought. I thought that was fine, and it's like his processor was still intact for the most part, so so that was able to work. I bought that, even though that was like towing the line of being too far. And it's like, you can't keep killing the same character and bringing him back over and over and over and over. So now, 2 movies into this one new continuity, they're already doing that with Bumblebee. And I'm like, okay, let's stop it. It's like, so for my own peace of mind, I'm saying Bumblebee was in a coma, and they just did not telegraph that very well. And it was something that was cut out of the final movie, the final product, and they just unwisely decided to choose to treat him as dead, even though the original plan was just for him to be in a coma and state that. But then they wanted to get that runtime down. Dang it. But then him coming back and jumping out of the back of Stratosphere, it's like, that was like, okay, finally the movie is working for me. This is now it's like this is the little instances of style that I feel like Stephen Capel Jr. was trying to put in the movie is really coming through here. And it's like, I see what he was going for, but I feel like the studio is just so insistent of getting that runtime down that they really were like, on the fast track that we gotta get this done. We gotta get out of here. And, just a little, it's like no more than, you can barely go over 2 hours, and it's barely over 2 hours with credits at that. So it's like, they could have easily put another 15-20 minutes in here and fleshed some stuff out, and I don't think anyone would have complained, because it would have been, not everyone is going to like everything. You're always going to have some detractors. Like, if there's someone that just doesn't like Transformers, then there's probably nothing you can do, to turn them onto Transformers. It's like, because if they just don't like the concept, and it's like, maybe they're anti-war, so they're, oh, this is just another institution that perpetuates war. It's like, they're just never going to like Transformers. It's fine, whatever. So I feel like, you wouldn't have had as many people. You wouldn't really upset that many people by making a slightly longer, more well thought out. It's like, everyone gets their dues, and and explain a couple more things. It's like, just, and it's not even really, it's not really even explaining things further. It's really just giving more time for these characters to be characters, and flesh them out a little bit more, and just let them interact off of each other, because like I think that scene in the warehouse is great. It's like, hey Prime, how you doing? Are those new ribs? And Arcee's like, Mirage, what have you done? And it's like, oh, it's like, he was already in the car when you called. So, but don't worry, he's cool. So it's cool. It's like, not cool. It's like, I will deal with your mistake later. And I thought all of that was great. That was done really well. And it's like the plan came together a little quick for my liking, but you know what? I liked the way they did it. It's like, okay, well, how about, do you want to do it for friendship? Man, that sounded corny when I said it. It's like, you know what? There was enough charm there with Mirage. They made it work. I wanted more kind of downtime scenes with that. Even the fight on Staten Island or Ellis Island, it was Staten Island, Ellis Island, where I did kind of like laugh out loud here because they actually made this line work where Nightbird takes off and Mirage says verbatim, they fly now? I'm like, oh, you actually made it work in this context because this is something new to you. And it's like jet troopers have been around for so long in Star Wars and jetpacks in general that, stormtroopers taking flight should not be surprising. But it's like Nightbird randomly taking off like that when she's got other car parts on her and, not knowing anything about these guys. It's like, oh, they fly now? It's like, okay, that is a line that makes sense in this context. I'm glad someone made it work. That actually got a good laugh out of me in the theater. So there's one emotion. There is one emotion that the movie gave me prior to basically the last 10 minutes. I guess I will admit that now that I'm thinking about it. But like I said, I was never bored watching this movie. I just wish that they pumped the brakes a little bit and gave time for things to breathe. And so like when they're fighting on Ellis Island and Mirage gets knocked over after Nightbird throws him around and Elena and Noah are there and he's like, oh, hey, you're still alive. Cool. It's like, it's just little moments like that. I wanted more of that in this movie. And I feel like they didn't have quite enough of it in there because they were too focused on let's move on. And now you're probably saying, it's like, well, the Bayverse is more guilty of this than this movie is. And for the most part, I agree with that. However, I feel like with the Bayverse, the thing it gives you, though, in place of, like, well-written characters and competent storylines and stuff is spectacle. So by the end of one of those movies, you still feel like that you've witnessed something. That it's like, that it's like, okay, the story may be bonkers stupid, like The Last Night. Boy, I do not like watching The Last Night because the story is stupid. However, I cannot deny that the fights they have in there are pretty, when they happen, are pretty cool. There's it's like I'll be the first to admit it. I like Michael Bay's directing style. Maybe it's because I've grown up with these Transformers movies and I haven't seen all of his filmography, but the 3 or 4 other movies I've seen of his that are non-Transformers related, I have actually enjoyed them a fair bit. What was that one he did for Netflix with Ryan Reynolds? Six Underground. That was it. That I enjoyed that quite a bit. It was a fun. I thought at times, it's not Shakespeare, but it's like, there was some fun, kind of smartly written couple fun, moments in there, and it was a competent enough action movie. It's like, because there's this scene, for those that haven't seen it, there's this scene where they're assaulting this rooftop penthouse to go catch a guy that, it's like to go save this guy they've been hired to save, this group of mercenaries. And so they hook up these little things to all the windows. And they're like, okay, so Ryan Reynolds, how are we going to infiltrate this place? Because, this is all bulletproof glass. And he says, did anyone ever go to a movie between the years of blah, blah, blah and 2015? Then you might have heard this. And he cranks the volume button up all the way. And it's the THX audio intro, the boom, that. And it plays so loud that it shatters the windows. My dad and I, when we were watching this, had to pause the movie because it was a Netflix movie. We had to pause the movie because we were falling off the couch in hysterics. Like, that is such, for us, that really hit our humor, our style of humor, and being liking movies and stuff, and and all that. So it's like that. I like Michael Bay movies. I will, I will admit it. So for me anyway, it's like, even as bad as The Last Night is, it's terrible. Terrible. One of the worst movies I've ever seen. Probably the only movie that's worse than that I have seen is probably the only two that are worse than it is Troll 2, and which is one of those famous bad movies, and and Green Lantern, ironically also with Ryan Reynolds. But with 1 through 4 and even 5 in terms of the set pieces and stuff, they're well put. I think they're well put together. I can track what's happening. I think the set pieces are cool, and the locations that they show off is always cool. Like whether they be the pyramid, Chicago, Hong Kong, even that little chunk of Cybertron that's got some grass on it from where it impacts with the ground, and they're fighting in one of the big octagons, and then they go to the ignition chamber, and it starts to fall through the air. And it's like, I love that scene so much. The movie's horrible as a whole, but that scene is awesome. It's like, it's and then you do get a weird. This is a really cool character moment that is kind of weirdly placed because it has no bearing on the rest of the movie. But Megatron pinning Optimus to the ground with one arm, with Optimus's own sword, because his other arm's been cut off. And he's like, fed up after all these movies of fighting, just screams, "We were brothers once." But Optimus, who's also fed up with the fighting and just ready to be done with Megatron, answers just once and kicks him out of the ignition chamber as it's falling through the sky. That's awesome. That's cool. And then, it's like, and Hot Rod, "Stop the time." And this, it's actually making a slow-mo gun. Oh, that makes total sense when it's a Michael Bay movie. And all this other stuff. It's like, I like all those set pieces. And something I like about these set pieces is that when Bay goes to do these action scenes, they're all done as practically as possible. Bay is filming the camera movements and the explosions and the actors running and stuff. And it's like, yeah, the robots obviously aren't there. But he's filming as, but it's like the driller scene in Dark of the Moon, the driller drilling into the, destroying the skyscraper they're in. They built an entire floor of a giant office building on a gimbal, and they tossed it around. And so the actors are actually falling, they're putting it at an incline, and they're actually slipping down this thing and everything. And then they just CG'd the environment behind them to make it look like even some of it probably wasn't even CG'd because they actually shot it outside. So, because there's behind the scenes footage of that too, I remember watching back in the day. So as much stuff as possible was done practically. And Bay is the master of Bayhem. He does know how to, at least for those out there that do enjoy his directorial style. I feel like, I feel like that it works. And I think, the reason his style of Transformers movies eventually petered out is that the story wasn't, it's like the story kind of got worse and worse as time went on. Again, I think Age of Extinction is actually in a lot of ways the pinnacle of the storytelling in that series because of it does so many what I think are cool and interesting things with the robots. But the last night just put the kibosh on all that, and domestically they actually hadn't been making as much money. And it's like Revenge of the Fallen was like the highest grossing that the series had ever been domestically, and it was really China keeping it propped up. And and then the last night was just so bad, and everyone heard that it was so bad that was just kind of the last straw. But I feel like if the story had been good consistently, then maybe we would still be getting the Bayverse. But that's a total alternate reality out there that someone else is living in. That's not us. But but there's a certain style that Bay was the master of. And I think despite, the tropes eventually getting old and, having to cut his movies and end them where they were, even though it was on a cliffhanger and everything, that I think there was merit to that style, and it fits the type of stories he was telling in those movies he did for Transformers. Because like I said, the cinematography, how the cinematography interacted with the robots, how the robots interacted with the environment around them in terms of the locations they used, in terms of the story. I think from that aspect, that was always expertly done. It was, except for The Last Night. The Last Night, it's just just so I have to stop saying this, let's just assume when I'm praising the Bay movies for the things that I think they get right, let's just assume I'm not discussing The Last Night unless I bring it up in like, except for this one thing from The Last Night, like, the last fight. But so that's another reason why I feel like I didn't really like Rise of the Beast as much, is that, and I feel like it was Michael Bay light, because it's doing so many of those same tropes, but it's not in terms of the plot, but in terms of the cinematography, in terms of the CG. I don't think the CG is really very good in this movie. I think the robot designs are good. I think they're animated well. They move, I think their movement is cool and stuff, but I just don't think they look as good in the environments they're in as previous movies. I mean, I think Transformers 2007 outclasses this movie in terms of visual effects in every single way. And that movie's, 16 years old now, almost. It's like, how is a movie from 2007, how does that movie have way more convincing visual effects than a movie from 2023 with the latest computer software and the best animators in the business? Well, actually, not the best animators in the business, because, and I think that's part of the problem here, is that ILM did not do the visual effects on this movie. It was Weta and another company that I couldn't track down their name. And which is also surprising because Weta they're not as a visual effects company, they're not slouches either. They're probably in like the number 2 or 3 spot behind ILM. So it's like, so what happened here? It's like, did they keep having to redo shots and redo shots and redo shots that, because they kept, re-editing the movie? And is that after a point, did they finally just have to go, this is as good as we're going to be able to get it? Or was it a money-saving measure? Because I think one of the reasons I don't think the bots look as good in this movie as in prior movies is that they don't have reflective surfaces. Like, if you look at Prime's face, for instance, in this one, it's a lot of, and also the like the silver, like, rain guards or whatever that are above the windows on the cab of his truck. That, they are not a shiny silver. It's all the colors on these robots, on most of them, are like actually mattes, matte. I think I'm saying that correctly. It's like, it's like a matte gray, and it's all dirty and crusty and everything. But then when they turn into their vehicle modes, they're all shiny and pristine. So there's a disconnect there where, they would transform in the Bay movies. It's like Optimus transforms. It's like, I think a good example is the observatory scene from the first movie, where the humans have been carted off to Hoover Dam, and the Autobots are investigating the glasses. And it's like, fire it up, Optimus. And, it's like the beam goes through the glasses, and it's like, the code on these glasses, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, were we so different? They're young, it cuts to the scene of as Optimus is narrating, it's like, they're a young species, they have much to learn, and the humans are overlooking Hoover Dam. It's like, there's so many good close-ups on the robots there, and those silver panels on Optimus there, they are shining in the light, they're reflecting light. Even Optimus's face and the small little things, like, it's not really reflecting the light, so to speak, but it's interacting with the light in a certain way that it's just so much more believable than the way Rise of the Beast handles its CG, to where it seems like they made them purposefully dirty so that way you wouldn't notice that they're not really correctly interacting with the light. And I think, and the reason I feel like this is probably, they did this on purpose, is that I feel like the bots look pretty good in the dark. I feel like, like when they're on the fight on Ellis Island, oh yeah, that looks pretty good. It's like the warehouse scene where, it's like, it's low light, there's not very much to reflect off of. It's, softer lighting and everything. It's like, I think they look pretty good there. But then, like, all the stuff, like, as soon as they leave New York, when the sun comes out and it's Peru and all the stuff going on in Peru, I feel like with the Maximals, I think actually look pretty good. But it's like, but I think that's because, they're giant animal robots, so they're not supposed to look exactly the same. They don't transform into vehicles, so they can have more of that dirty matte look to it. But then with the Autobots, Prime, it's like Prime, especially, standing out in the, it's like, the stand down, I won't ask a second time. I remember people calling that out and it not looking good in the trailer. And I think it still doesn't look that great in the final film. And it's like, of course, and everyone brings in, and then everyone knows the shot. And I brought it up earlier of activating the face mask. In the trailer it was "let them come," which of course isn't a line that's actually in the finished movie. But that's fine. They invent things for trailers all the time. That's fine. It's like, and even that in the final movie, because I said it's like, oh, the lip sync's out wrong here, but even that, him transforming on the road, it's like, I mean, the dirt kicks up and everything, he destroys some of the pavement on the road and everything, and that looks good, but then like the hills behind him and everything, and it's like, I'm questioning if like some of this stuff was even filmed on location, or if like, it's like, I mean, they obviously did the car driving scenes down the hill and everything, and it's like Battletrap and Nightbird on the road, and then Battletrap turns around and fires the missiles, and Wheeljack does the quick turn, and the missile goes all the way through the door and past RC. But RC never really looks like she's comped into the scene appropriately. And then when Prime and Scourge are falling down the hill, it's like, I don't think those are actually the hills. I feel like those hills are CG. It's like, none of that ever really quite looked right to me. And then that brings up the final fight with the volcano and everything. It's like that whole thing was just and this was fun. This was funny when the second trailer came out and it showed that, that one shot take of, going underneath the bridge. Primal rips the head off of the Scorponok in his mouth, and then Rhinox and RC charge by, and RC jumps off of Rhinox and is standing there with Wheeljack, and they're blasting Terracon freezers and stuff left and right. It's like, I remember seeing comments on that trailer, people going, oh, what, and going, oh, this looks so much better than the Bay action scene, because look, there's no cuts and it's one shot. But then there were other people below them going, well, you realize this action scene is actually a little bit more boring and easier to do because none of this is real. The set, the environment, the characters, all of it is CG. It's not, and there's nothing actually real here. It's like whereas like, the ending of Dark of the Moon, yeah, the Autobots are CG, but the explosions, the people running, the cars, the destroyed cars and everything, all that stuff was there on the day. Shia LaBeouf is jumping off of cars, and they just put Bumblebee and Ratchet behind him in post. So again, say what you will about the Bay films, and there is plenty to say about the Bay films in terms of them not being great. And I agree with a lot of those criticisms, but I love them. I love the first four anyway. But, it's like, there were so many practical effects that went into making those movies look good, whether or not you actually enjoyed Bay's directing style. That, the ending of Rise of the Beast just being a giant CGI fest, that's why I was just really just kind of sitting there going, this is fine, until B showed up. I'm like, okay, finally, Bumblebee is back, yay! And it's like, Mama said knock you out, and he's like, and then he stabs Nightbird through the chest with her own wing and lands on the ground as pieces of her rain down around him. And it's like, and he's finally entered the battle. It's like, that was cool. I wish we had gotten more of that in this movie. And then the exosuit on Noah, again, it's more mass shifting things, and it's I don't particularly care for it, but I'm not really going to complain about it either. So that's really a non-issue for me, I guess. But and then I don't really, and I feel like Prime's arc in this movie is just such a watered down version of his Age of Extinction arc, because I was honestly hoping that when I would be sitting down to do this review, that I would say Rise of the Beast is actually my new favorite film in this series, because it takes some things that Age of Extinction attempted to do, and I think Age of Extinction actually did well, and executes them better here. That's what I was hoping I would be able to say coming into this, and I can't. I just can't. But I feel like on the cutting, but there's so much evidence, I feel like, of that having originally been there, and they just removed small things here and there that it added up in the end to where it's like, I could have been saying that if they just didn't cut stuff. It's like, keep the transit scene, have a couple extra lines of dialogue here and there, give Elena more stuff to do. And I think I want this to be the movie a lot of people are saying it is. Where it's like, oh, it was fun from start to finish. It was, all the robots had, so much great personality. And it's like, and yeah, they were on screen a lot. I did appreciate that. I did really like that. But it just didn't really work for me. And that's unfortunate. And I've been comparing it a lot to the Bay films, and that's not totally completely fair because this director is not Michael Bay. He had, and like I've said, it's clear that he wants to do in a lot of ways his own style here, and he injected some of that into the film, and I did like that extra style he injected in places. However, I feel like the plot was so closely tied to what the other movies had done that it called for that I would have if Michael Bay had directed this movie, would the plot have probably been a bit more of a disaster? Would some of the characters have been annoying? Yeah, probably. But the visuals, I think, would have been a big improvement on this. And I would have, and even if I had gone, well, that plot was stupid, and I hate the fact that they keep allowing him to butcher these scripts. But hey, at least it was a cool spectacle to watch. And I can't really say that for this. So at the end of the day, Rise of the Beast for me is just kind of a meh imitation of Michael Bay. And I really wish they hadn't gone this direction. I really wish that they had focused on a smaller, not globetrotty story. It was cool to see Unicron. I think the design looks really good. I mean, it's straight up his G1 design, but they made it look a little more greebly and and a little more realistic and live action and everything. I think the voice works for the little itty bit we got it. Maybe if they just add a little bit more boom to it, because I wanted Unicron's voice to shake the theater, and it didn't quite do that. So maybe that'll be something that they'll fix for next time around or whatever, whenever he appears again. So I feel weird comparing it to the Bay films because I don't want to, because it's so clearly trying to be its own thing, but it's also at the same time trying to be a bad imitation of one of the Bay films. And I really just wish that they had gone in a different, smaller direction, more akin to Bumblebee. It's like, yeah, have a larger cast of Autobots, have some larger action sequences and stuff. But as it was, this unfortunately for me just kind of fell a little bit flat and feels more like a bad imitation of a Bay film. And it's like, and yeah, but for what that's worth, it wasn't offensively bad. So I understand why people are enjoying it more because I understand. I totally get it. A lot of people just do not like Bay's style, and they were sick and tired of him making Transformers movies. That's fine. I get it. And so if this movie's working more for them, hey, great. I'm glad it's working for them. I just hope that next time around we can get something that's a little bit more, its own thing and less, a copycat of stuff we already had before, and it moves forward. I also wanted to see more actual Decepticons in it because there's no actual Decepticons in this movie. Again, the transit scene got cut. I'm very curious as to what a Decepticon controlled Cybertron looks like in this continuity. It would just be really awesome if the next movie opened, because I wanted it in this movie, but if we have to save it for the beginning scene of the next movie, whatever, I guess. Not counting Transformers 1. I'm really hoping that one's good. I feel like it could be, because that seems like one that it's animated. We don't care as much, and Transformers 1 could be Transformers is like Spider-Verse or something, so that could be cool. So ILM didn't work on the live action movie, but they are animating the animated movie, which the only other animated movie ILM's ever actually done, I'm pretty sure, is Rango. So it's like which was more than 12 years ago at this point or something like that. So it's like, that's weird, but okay, whatever. Maybe them working on the animated movie just guarantees they're going to work on the next live action movie too. So I don't know. But I think I need to see it again for sure. I think I definitely need to see this movie again. Now that I know what it is, maybe I'll go see it again and I'll lighten up on it a little bit. I don't feel like seeing it again is really going to fix a lot of the problems I have with it. But going to see it again, I might, knowing what to expect, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, yeah, okay, that really wasn't as bad as I thought. Or maybe the inverse is going to happen, and I'm going to go see it again, and it's like, I noticed more problems this time, because now I knew what to look for. So I think I'm going to go see it again for sure. So I mean, hey, they're getting another ticket sale out of me. But so yeah, if I go and I have like a big epiphany of revelations, like, oh no, now I see what everyone's, this movie is really great, then I'll probably do a part 2 to this, that's hopefully more positive. And same for the inverse. Like if I go see it again, it's like I'm like, okay, no, this is actually now on par with the last night for me. It's like there's so much wrong with this movie that I can't stomach it, and I don't understand how people can like this. So, which I don't think that's gonna happen, because like I said, it's just meh. It's just fine. There's nothing obscenely offensively wrong about it, other than it just being mid, and kind of meh. So for me anyway. So it's like I don't think so. So if I have some like big epiphany and I've got more to say on the subject, then I guess I'll do a part 2 after I go see it again. But that probably won't happen. So I guess right before I go, now that I've been talking for almost 2 hours, gosh, I'm starting to hear it in my voice too. My voice is starting to go. I will say, I think this is probably, I liked the G.I. Joe thing at the end. I did think that was, okay, if you're going to finally do it, now is the time to do it. We're in a new timeline. It's a new continuity. Sure, let's do the Hasbro Cinematic Universe. Throw in G.I. Joe. Retcon Sector 7 as, it's like, well, after the Transformer, after the Bumblebee incident, back in 87, like Sector 7 reformatted and, kind of regrouped, and it was this kind of now we're, now instead of just dedicated to the survival of the United States, and now we're a world peacekeeping task force, and we've renamed ourselves GI Joe, and here's Sergeant Burns, and his code name is one of the characters from GI Joe, Sergeant Slaughter or something like that. So yeah, it's like I think that, do we eventually get an actual G.I. Joe movie out of it, or do they just include the organization and Transformers from now on? I don't know, but it's like, if they're going to do it, you might as well do it now. So I guess we'll see. So yeah. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Transformers Rise of the Beasts. What did you guys think? Hopefully, your thoughts aren't giant essays like mine was here. Because like I said, almost going for 2 hours here. I really hoped that I wouldn't have had to do this when walking into the theater. So I was like, all right, let's see what we got here. And I walked out, I was like, well, I'm going to have a lot to say, that's for sure. It's like, again, I didn't dislike it. I just didn't really like it either. So yeah, that's how it is sometimes. So yeah, I think I'm still going to get this on Blu-ray when it comes out, and I will watch it again in the future, probably a couple times, because it's not horrendously bad like The Last Night, which I think shall forevermore remain the one Transformers movie I don't own on. I even had the 86 movie on Blu-ray. It's like I've got all of them on disc except The Last Night, and it's like I think I'll keep it that way. So yeah. So thank you for watching and listening. If you have watched this long, if you've scrubbed, hey, thank you for scrubbing too, and like listening to my thoughts here and there. It's like I appreciate it. Like, I know I went a long time, but I had a lot to say. So yeah, thank you for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that great stuff. Remember to follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Those links are, of course, in the description below. And I will see you guys next time. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.